Presentation on his 1, 2 and 3. Just listening, giving some feedback at the end. All the best, brother.
Thank you. Afternoon, guys.
Afternoon.
So this is my presentation on step 1, 2 and 3. Yeah, we'll start at the beginning. Step 1, the problem. And it is a problem, sorry for swearing. You know, we as a community, we are not as a community, as a collective, we're powerless over our addiction. That our lives have become manageable. You know, yeah, the disease of addiction. You know, for me, that obsession and that compulsion, you know, what just fucking centered in my mind. You know, like, once the obsession's on me, you know, if I've not got nothing in my life, I'm using. There's no two ways about it, I'm using, you know, I'm upsetting everyone. I'm upsetting my mum, my family, all that chaos around me, I'm just creating chaos. Nervous, man. So nervous. Do you know, and it's not just about the drugs for me. Do you know, most of you will know, do you know, I present in a way because I feel so insecure, you know, self-esteem, and I present with all these clothes and and that for me is the disease of addiction. You know what I mean? It is, and that's how it presents itself for me. Do you know, and then it leads on to, like, there's 3 aspects to this disease. You know, the physical, the spiritual, and the mental. You know, for me, physically, I've nearly died, I don't know how many times. I've had pneumonia, I've had fucking heart disease, I've got no visible veins left in my body, I've nearly lost a leg through it, you know. And spiritually, I'm absolutely bankrupt, you know. I'm void, I'm spiritually empty. You know, it got robbed of me. You know, everything was about getting and using and finding ways and means. Mentally, you know, it's like, especially over the last like 3 years, because it's been crap more than anything else. And the paranoia and the delusional thinking, it's been mental. And then I come out of denial. You know, I don't even know I'm lying. For me, and I don't even know I'm lying. I give these plausible but untrue reasons, you know, for my behaviour, you know, and I truly believe, like I'll say to my loved ones, like, that's it, I'm done. Truly believe, in that moment, I believe that I'm fucking done. Then go out and use again. You know, and it keeps me sick, that denial keeps me so sick. And it also tells me, you know, it's the only disease that, you know, it's the only disease that tells us we don't have a disease. You know what I mean? It tells us we don't have a disease when we're so poorly. You know, I'll go back to the physical, you know, for me, you know, I've gone back down to 8 stone, and truly believed I was okay, because I had a decent coat on and a decent pair of trainers, but I looked like death. I'd walk into my mum's house and she'd break into tears, she'd break into absolute tears. You know, and like, yeah, it tells you we don't have a disease, man. And that denial also, you know, rationalises it all, you know, and like, excusing my behaviour, you know. Again, my mum, because she's been the biggest casualty of my addiction, you know what I mean, apart from myself. But I've made excuses to my mum, I've hurt my mum, you know, all that stuff, man. And then the powerlessness, you know, over people, places and things. People, do you know what I mean? Totally fucking powerless. Until I kind of do this stuff, I get a bit of power. Do you know what I mean? Places, I'm powerless around that stuff, do you know what I mean? What people do within the places. And things, drugs, absolutely powerless. And for me, massive for me, powerless over my first thought. Absolutely fucking powerless over it. Do you know, and acting on it, you know. That's where the following steps, I'll explain that stuff in the following steps. And then the unmanageability section, you know, there's two aspects, inner and outer. You know, like inner, believing the world owes us, and I have for fucking years. I believe the world owes me a favour. You know what I mean? Depending on my mum, depending on my missus, just depending on everyone apart from me. And that worthless feeling. You know, I've got this head that will tell me I'm an absolute piece of shit. You know, and I kind of try and present this fucking thing, and I believe I'm because of what I've done, I feel I'm an absolute piece of shit. And that's, you know, all this stuff. I'm emotionally volatile, emotionally immature, emotionally fucked, never developed properly. You know, I picked up at 15, so I never developed properly. I'm here, scared to fucking death, do you know what I mean? And I'm jeweler. And that unmanageability, you know, outwardly, the jails, the fucking job. I never got a career because of this stuff. Never got a career, never developed. You know, outwardly I looked absolutely fucked. My family looked fucked. family issues, you know. My daughter, I hadn't seen my daughter since she was a baby, man. An absolute baby. You know, I hadn't seen her. Stuff from Lindsay, stuff from my mum, my sister, my nieces. All that stuff, man. And yeah, that's where spiritual principles come in. You know, at the start, do you know, I put this first, spiritual principles, yeah, because I kind of believe we've got to try and apply some of these things before we start this stuff. You know, so we've got to become open-minded to do it, to do a step one. We've got to become honest, we've got to become willing, we've got to have the acceptance, and we've got to have the humility. You know, I believe you've got to apply that stuff before you kind of start step one. So yeah, that's my step one, the fucking problem. Step two, the solution, boys. So again, we, together, we can't believe that the power of in ourselves could just throw us on air. You know, we've got hope in there. Replaces that fucking desperation, sorry for swearing, that desperation from step one. You know, and recovery is possible. Recovery is possible. I've seen it, man. I've seen it within the rooms of NA, you know what I mean? I've absolutely seen it. I've got evidence of it. And for me, that's what I need. I need evidence. I need evidence, man. You know, I've got hope. I can build family ties. I've got hope. I can remain abstinent, you know. I've got hope. I can fucking just job prospects, all that stuff, man. I've got hopes of that, you know. I was not brought up, you know, my mum never brought me up to die in active addiction. I've got hope I can be a mum, a son to my mum, you know what I mean? Because she's put so much into me, you know. New beginnings, it's all about new beginnings, you know. You know, I've been coming to Elisha like 2.5 years, and I've got hope back then, you know what I mean? From picking up this work, you know, I got hope back then. There's a way out, man. Then the sanity section. You know, total loss of perspective on what we're doing. Absolute total loss of perspective, you know. I just did not care who was hurting. Everything was out of balance, everything was just fucked. You know, just I'm making mental decisions, absolutely insane decisions, you know. Digging in my groin, nearly losing a leg. And just all that stuff, like, fucking. And then repeating the same mistakes, you know. I've been to jail over 30 times, you know, over 30 times, through repeating the same mistakes time and time again. You know, the insanity telling me I can control music. And the reality is I can't, man. I fucking can't. Do you know what I mean? I can't come in and believe. Do you know, for me, I struggle, you know, I don't struggle, right, so anyway, come in and believe, yeah. Faith, trust, do you know, faith, I've got to have faith in you lot. You know, because if I don't, I've got to have faith in you lot. Because on my own, today showed me that. Today showed me that, you know, I've had a shitty day, you know, and all I've had around me now is love and people asking me, you alright, you know what I mean? So, faith, you know, and I've got to trust this process. You know, I can't rush it. And against today showed me that I'm trying to rush things. I want to stop this, stop that, stop this, stop smoking, stop taking fucking antidepressants. I've just got to trust the fucking process, man. And a massive one for me, patience, because my close mates will tell you, you know, I am the most impatient person ever. You know, I need to gain, you know, foster some patience, I do. And yeah, probably earned ourselves. You lot, for me right now, you lot, meetings, literature, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, massive one. And you know, restoration and sanity. It's a process, man. It doesn't happen overnight, or it don't for me anyway, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, you know. I've got 30 years of active addiction behind me, you know, it's a process, man. And it's just, yeah. You know, I kind of try and implement this in my life, you know, live according to spiritual principles. I try to be kind to the first person I meet in the morning, do you know what I mean? I heard someone say it once, and try to be kind to the first person you meet in the morning, try to be nice. You know, if you fucking act out, just apologise, you know what I mean? We know when we're doing right and wrong. And it's like, if you're wrong, yeah. Spiritual principles to apply. I still think we can apply what I said in step one. We've got to become open-minded, willing, humility, foster some trust and faith. Right, so that's step 2. Step 3, absolute game changer. Step 3, absolute game changer. And it's, you know, we again, yeah, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So I'm making a decision. For the first time, I've made an informed choice, you know, whereas for years I never made an informed choice. You know, it was rather the institution that was in that made the choice for me, or it was my addiction that made that choice for me. You know, today I can make an informed choice, and I can make that decision just for today. You know, I can make that fucking decision numerous times a day. You know, I just need to kind of put the action in, because it is an action step. Put the action in, and yeah. And you know, and for me, I kind of need to choose all areas of my life to turn over, especially the ones that are attached to emotion. You know, for instance, my relationship. I need to turn that stuff over. All areas, not just my drug use, man. All areas in my life need to turn over. You know, self-love. Yeah, self-will, become closed-minded. I isolate. You know, stood here right now, I run to my room, lock my fucking door, and climb under my quilt. Do you know what I mean? That's what I want to do. That's my self-will. Do you know, and it's just, yeah, it's mental. And it causes, and you know, evidence has shown this, that it causes absolute chaos for me and for everyone around me. You know, and especially the people closest to me, my loved ones. You know, I've caused absolute, for running on myself, I've caused absolute fucking chaos, man. And yeah, God of our understanding can be anything. You know, as long as it's more powerful, more loving, and more caring than me. You know, the rooms of any, you lot. You know, just give me anything, man. You know, I truly believe this. I believe the God of my understanding speaks to me through my conscience. It tells me what's right and wrong. You know, I know what's right. You know, and I don't know if it's morals or principles or whatever, yeah, but I was brought up to know right from wrong. You know, so I believe my conscience tells me if I'm about to do something, fuck it, I know it's wrong. You know, and I do try to pray. I'm not going to stand here and lie. You know, I do try to pray. I have no fucking idea what I'm praying to. You know, but I do. You know, meditation, I do meditate. You know, and I just don't go to sleep through the afternoon. You know, I actually do try. I do lie on my bed and I try and meditate. I do. I do lie on my bed and I try and meditate, man. I turn the telly off 2 minutes ago, and I try and just listen. Just fucking listen. And you know, yeah, it's loving, caring, and patient. Patience is massive for me, man. And then turning it over. I need to check my motives when I'm turning it over. Is it for the right reason? Do you know? And am I wanting it for? Yeah, I'm wanting it for the right reason. And I need to do this hourly sometimes. Fuck it. Sometimes every 5 minutes for me. Do you know what I mean? Because myself will sneak in, and I'm coming out sideways. And again, I need to choose all those areas of my life to turn over. I can't just pick and choose what I want to turn over in that minute, you know. And yeah, I struggle with that. I really struggle with that. And the spiritual principles I need to apply: surrender, willingness, commitment, hope, faith, and trust. Thank you, guys. That's my presentation.